Only once in a lifetime comes the privilege of building a church. A church that will last into the future until Jesus comes. We build not for the present only. We build for the future. And in time, our children and our grandchildren and yours will ask, who built this church? Why is it here? And you will tell them then, the people that built this church loved God and they wanted to worship Him in spirit and truth. And this is built with love and care, courage, sacrifice to reach the community now and tomorrow. May God bless you as you continue to do that through the next decades of service. Congratulations, Eastside Baptist Church, on your 60th anniversary. God's done some wonderful things here through the years. I was privileged to be here at the beginning. I'm Ken Ellison, the first pastor of Eastside. And now, after these 60 years, I've returned and become a member. And I wish you God's blessing, God's grace, and God's power, ministry and service in these coming years.
The year 2021 represents the 60th anniversary, the 60th birthday of Eastside Baptist Church, the church that I have the joy and honor of pastoring today. But long before me, there have been faithful men and women who have been leading this church, and the first couple and the first pastoral couple are with me today. They're still active in our church, Ken and Mary Ellison. They were here when this church was launched, and even before so, part of the organization back in 1961. Ken and Mary Ellison, welcome to All Things Eastside today. It's great to have you here. Ken, this church has its origins in some ways with Roswell Street Baptist Church. Take us back there and help us teach us what happened back in the late 50s, early 60s, would you?
Thank you, Dr. Hull. First of all, let me say it's a wonderful privilege to share something of the background and the history of Eastside Baptist Church. History of a church is important because it helps us know how things began, some of the background, its strengths and its goals, and to see how we have fulfilled the Great Commission and done the work of Christ. Actually, Eastside was a vision, I think, of Roswell Street Baptist Church back in the late 50s. Of course, Atlanta was expanding. Marietta was growing. East Marietta particularly was growing. And some of the members who lived out in this area saw really a great need for a church out here. And so with the pastor, they envisioned starting a mission. And Dr. Walter Sanders, who was pastor of the Roswell Street Baptist Church, led. He had a wonderful committee to work with him. And they envisioned starting a church here on this side of the chicken, they would say in those days.
Right.
We called it east of Highway 41, Old 41.
41.
Which runs all the way from Florida to the Canadian border.
That's right.
And so they saw this as a real artery of growth out here. And they had a committee. Dan Brothers, Clayton Brothers were on it. Ken Bramlett, Marcus Finch, all of those gentlemen are gone. Actually, there's one man still living, and he is a member of our church, Bill Guthrie. And Bill was on that original committee. So they came out here and purchased 3.68 acres less than 4 acres of land right here on this corner to start a mission.
So really what is you're sitting here and over the shoulder, which is our north parking lot, that was the original piece of land right here?
Actually, the original piece of land ran from about, ran along Little Road right here.
Right.
Now, we had 2 issues.
You had the firehouse
We
here,
had
right?
a firehouse here, and then we had a community clubhouse here on the corner. So both of those pieces of property were not available at that time. So that's why actually the church was facing Little Road rather than Roswell Road at Lower Roswell.
Right.
So that was the beginning of the piece of property started by Roswell Street in connection with the Noonday Baptist Association. In those days, we had a very wonderful man interested in missions, started a number of missions throughout Marietta, Pete Day, and he was so active in starting this church. So that's how it actually began in really in 1960. And
So it was a community of Roswell Street members who were living on this side of 41. You had Wheeler that was probably on the had not yet started, but was probably on the books or on the map as to being created, which is just a stone's throw away. So 61, things get organized. You've got associational support, local church that wants to plant a church out here. How did the connection come that you and Mary were? How did the Lord orchestrate getting you here? Because were you in another part of Georgia or another part of the South at that time?
actually, Mary and I were in New Orleans. I was pastor of a church in South Louisiana.
Okay.
Very happy situation. We had finished our seminary work, and I'd done an extra year of graduate work. And we were hoping at that time to go on to the mission field, but I had some little duodenal ulcer issues, so the Foreign Mission Board said, no, wait. So we began to look at the other opportunities, and so I had actually been to Virginia, my home state, to preach in view of a call, and coming back, I stopped to visit a friend of mine, Buddy and Carol Crowder, and the pastor of the Minister of Music at Roswell Street. I went to church that Sunday night, and the pastor was not feeling well. He asked, would you like to preach? And I said, well, thank you. I preached what I preached this morning in Virginia. So I did. I filled the pulpit for Dr. Sanders, and the Lord was in it. I'm just absolutely convinced of that. A week later, Dr. Sanders called me and said, our mission is moving faster than I thought. The committee who heard you said, we want that man to be our pastor. So the Lord began to work, and Roswell Street brought us here.
How many families would have made up that original core? I'm kind of interested too. How did they become aware of you? Did you? Back when I was a young man in 1983, I planted a church. Started with a core of 18. I found myself out in the evenings visiting people, casting vision. Once it was determined that you would come here to be our pastor, did you find yourself throughout the days just going from one lead to the other, sharing what the vision was? And did you find people starting to be attracted to this whole idea of a church plant?
Roswell Street envisioned that first year that I would be on the staff at Roswell Street.
Okay.
So I was on the staff at Roswell Street as their mission pastor. We began, actually, the group met the first Sunday in June of 1961. Mary and I arrived, and I was in the pulpit on the third Sunday of June. And In that first service that morning, there were about 170 people. And when we gave the invitation and opened the doors of the church, there were about 80 people who filled out cards saying they wanted to be a part of the mission.
That's a great start.
It was an unusual start. Also, Roswell Street had a commitment from 5 families who lived in this area: the brothers, the Scotts, Robert Hill and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Leon Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell is still living, by the way. There were 5 families who came out here to do the Sunday school and became the basic working core. And that was a tremendous help, a tremendous blessing.
Let me go back and ask, and forgive me if I missed this. Did you meet in the community center at first? Is that where you gathered when you had services? And because at some point there was construction of what we now respectfully have called the Ellison building in your honor. There was the 3.5 or so acres. Where did y'all first gather as Eastside for worship?
There were at least 2 community meetings in this clubhouse, which does not exist anymore.
Okay.
It's just a little...
Which is right here on Lower Roswell Road.
Right here on this corner. They met a couple of times, just informational meetings.
Right.
Directed by Roswell Street, led by Bill Shockley, who was the Minister of Education. And they met a couple of times there. And then when we came, they had this building, which I will show later, right here behind this picture, off to the north. Actually, the edge of the building was just about the middle of this sanctuary,
Right.
80 feet to the north.
Okay.
It was a small building,
Right.
40 by 80.
Yeah.
It was a cement block building,
Yep.
2-story. We had some rather disparaging remarks about that little cement block building on the corner. The committee did a beautiful job of trying to add some color and some character to it, which they did. And so the very first Sunday, we met in the top level of that. The bottom of that building was still mud. There was no basement. And so the first Sunday we ran over, and then that next week we began to pour the cement on the floor below this and move the sanctuary.
Do you have any recollection as to what the cost of that 2-story 60 by or 40 by 80 building was?
I think, if I remember correctly, it was less than $30,000. The contractor,
Huge amount of money, though.
The contractor was Dan Brothers, who was a member of the church.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about Eastside is Roswell Street had a major plan for all of these buildings. When I came, I knew what Eastside would eventually look like with this sanctuary and the 2 wings on either side.
Right.
Of course, we did not envision at that time all the development to the east.
Right.
One of the things, I want to go back just a moment to your question about membership. One of the interesting points that the committee talked with me about when I came back for an interview was the target group in this area. Who was I to target? And I understood I was not to visit Roswell Street members, not to visit First Baptist members, but literally to go door to door introducing the church and myself. And so for the first couple of years, that's what Mary and I did. We were just foot evangelists walking through the community. And in my mind still, there are a number of wonderful conversations, wonderful contacts
Right.
that those folk eventually came to Eastside. Some of them did not. But Eastside very quickly developed a name for a warm-hearted fellowship, a biblically based preaching ministry,
Yeah.
a strong interest in the community. And John, my dear pastor in Virginia when I was a boy, was a Moody graduate, and he was a soul winner.
Yeah.
And he would just go from door to door
Right.
talking with people about the Lord. And he instilled that in my heart, and it has served me so well
Right.
in my own ministry. This year, I'm celebrating 68 years of preaching the wonderful gospel of Jesus. 68 years. I started when I was a senior in high school, 1953 in Roanoke, Virginia. And with this wonderful lady, we've had a glorious ministry.
Yes, you have, and still continue to. Still continue to. Mary, let me ask you, if you will, what was it like? What was the Lord doing in you, as well as Ken, thinking that you would come and basically plant a church and start a new work? You had a missionary spirit already, but I think that was probably more of a cross-cultural international feel. But here you were planting a mission church in what would become a thriving community. Can you recall what was going through your heart and your mind at that time?
I was just a young thing. I was 25, and after 6 weeks after we came, our son Brent was born. So I was a busy mom and busy, but I saw this little cinder block building in the cow pasture, and I thought, Lord, what do you want us to do here?
Wow.
But you've called us, and we're here. And I had the joy of helping begin the Women's Missionary Union and the first GAs for girls,
Right.
and trying to get a mission emphasis that was on my heart. And I thank the Lord that I could be here and be a part of this ministry.
So you look out and you saw what was a
Yes,
farmland.
cow pasture.
And it was were the houses that we have across from us today on Little, were those houses there? Or was that slowly being developed, or do you recall what that was like? You looked over here and you saw cow pasture, but did you start seeing
Well, there were
development
houses.
here?
There were houses there.
So they were on the edge of, this was the edge of Marietta.
Yes, but quite different from what it is now.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. A beautiful thing to see.
Actually, John, the development ran along an axis from really out here on Powers Ferry,
Powers Ferry Road.
just north of here. Basically, all of this area back through here was this property here was owned by Mr. Joe Daniels,
Yes.
under about 120 some acres, I think. And Mr. Daniels and his wife were members here. Their family, they still have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, members of this church.
Right.
And so the development was just right along here. And Mr. Daniels himself was a very visionary man. He was going to develop all of this property. And so we had, in those early days, some people of vision, of development of the community and of East Marietta, and a burden on their hearts to reach those people. And the consensus was that really what was needed in this East Marietta was a church that would reach out and bring the unchurched and the lost to Christ.
And really it was known in those days as East Marietta. Today, the mantra is East Cobb, but it really was East Marietta. And you had, what you're saying is you had some civic-minded people who wanted to see a community grow, and in the heart of that, they planted a church. Do you remember when the school next door, was the school next door already here, or was it, was that after you came here? Do you remember, was that 63, 64?
Actually, that school was not there. There was no
Valley Views, I'm thinking.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're talking about this school here to the
Yes,
east.
sir. Right.
Sedalia School was here.
So Sedalia Park was there.
It was sort of the edge, Sedalia Park. There was some development out Roswell Road, but nothing of the Johnson's Ferry area, nothing here on this side of the river, the big homes that are there now. The community, really from 285 back this way,
Yeah.
there was absolute no development.
Now, we had the early formations of the Vietnam War. Lockheed gets the C-5A contract during the Johnson administration. I've heard Nelson Price say that time, about 64, 65, 66, you really began to see an influx of a new population of people, which is part of the reason this area exploded, because you had all these highly educated, highly trained, higher earning people coming in. Do you remember the shape of that? Do you remember that happening here in the last couple years of your pastorate? Did you begin to start seeing a new influx of people from outside of Atlanta or outside of Georgia?
We were very much aware of the influx. Now, the influx actually did not take place until probably 68, 69, 70.
Mm-hmm.
We were aware of a lot of people coming, moving into the area. We were trying to reach out to them, but our own ministry, and I need to include this at this point. Mary and I were mission volunteers before we met, and we knew that someday, somewhere, the Lord would use us. We were not aware of how He would use us in this mission opportunity here as it grew. But I've always had a broader vision. Somewhere I read John Wesley saying, I am pastor to the whole world.
The world is my parish.
The world is my parish. I never did feel like I was that big a preacher. That's not what I'm talking about. But
you had a real cross-cultural global view.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying simply that.
Which was huge, by the way, in the early 1960s. That was a pioneering post-World War II view.
It was. And the Lord involved us in that. And when we saw this growth, I have in my memory when my wife and I told the church that we would be leaving and going as missionaries. I have the vision in my mind of an elderly gentleman who lived right out here, walking from down there up here to my office it was on Monday morning after we had resigned, or telling them we were going to resign. It was Mr. Joe Daniels. Yeah. And he sat in my office, a man of great wisdom. I loved him dearly. And he looked at me and he said, do you really think this is what you're supposed to do? And I said, Mr. Joe, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I don't understand it. Why anybody, any young preacher, I was 32. I was 32 at the time. Why any preacher at 32 would leave this congregation of almost 1,000 people with all the opportunities we have and go to the other side of the world. Amazing. I don't understand that except in my heart and the heart of my wife. This is what we're supposed to do.
Obey God.
Obey God. And he said, well, you don't have to go. And I said, I appreciate that more than you know. But he said, now, if you have to go, you go on.
Yeah.
This is going to be a good church, a great church, whether it's you or somebody else. Wow. You can imagine. But he was that kind of man. He was very honest.
But also, you're
very
that kind of
wise.
man is that you had a consuming desire to obey God, and it does speak volumes. Looking back, people have known about this for years. It speaks volumes, Mary, of your obedience to God to leave what could have been a great life, was a great life, but an even greater lifestyle and a much easier. It's not pastoring a church, growing church has its challenges. We all know that. That never changes. But you chose in 1967 to pack your bags and head to Asia, which is just phenomenal. Do you remember those conversations that the two of you had back then? Share that with us, what you
I
can.
just remember this was finally, we're going to do what God wants us to do.
So you always felt this was kind of a temporary.
Well, we thought we'd go right after seminary.
Sure.
And this
You were
7 year-
missionaries.
But the 7 years was good.
Yeah.
My main ministry was teaching 16, 17-year-old teenagers.
Right here.
Yes, right here. And today, some of them are pastors and pastors' wives.
And if you think about this, Mary, the beauty of this for both of you is here you are 60 years later after you planted,
Still here.
still here, never really left us, lived near, you left us, but you had Eastside always praying for you, supporting you, caring for you. You came back here and then, Kenny, you've never retired. So I say in your retirement years, let's say your transition years, you're close to the church. But I think about reaping what you've sown. And you sowed tremendous seed, planted it in the ground here. Others, including myself, have been blessed and have experienced the harvest of what you've done. But you too have sown well and reaping well in that you have wonderful relationships here. People love you to death. You're as busy as you want to be. You have opportunities to minister. Ken is working with a Johnson Fair Church and their Bahasa Indonesian congregation. Y'all are there. That's the joy. I want to get back to the whole thing. Obey God and leave the consequences to God of your obedience. And that's what you've done. And it's amazing to see it come full circle now as you're in the years you're in now. Ken?
Let me just add a bit of humor. Mary just said we said finally the Lord's going to let us do what we wanted to do. That came out actually as in the church meetings when we were ready to resign, and actually someone verbalized it, not very kindly. Well, you've only used this as a stepping stone.
Oh dear.
And I really had to work with that in my mind. And I have to say that Eastside was not a stepping stone to something bigger. But and we've talked about this and I've written about it, as I reflect over these 60 years, our hearts, Mary and my heart, are deeply and humbly grateful to the great God of creation and of salvation and of service, and how he brought us here. And little could we have imagined this wonderful relationship that we have enjoyed and been blessed by Eastside Baptist Church while we were here, while we were on the mission field, and now. John, it is a beautiful spiritual paradigm. I think that's what God
Amen.
wants ministry to be. And I do not think of our time here as temporary. As I look back on these 60 years, I think that Eastside was the place God brought me to prepare me for ministry.
Absolutely.
Prepare me for ministry.
It is so clear now.
And we
back.
had wonderful spiritual leadership among the laity of the church. We had a wonderful community of congregationalism and openness. They spoke their minds, and I learned, and I grew, and I grew. And I have to admit, very honestly, when we got to Indonesia, and after about a year, I would have given my right arm and half of my left one just to come back and pastor this church again. But
Yeah.
as God worked in our lives, we realized that this wonderful privilege here at Eastside had equipped us to serve in a larger capacity.
Fantastic foundation. And then I think, Ken, am I the seventh pastor here? I think in the 60-year history. And that speaks to a congregation of people that don't run preachers off and long tenures. And I'm starting my 6th year. You had 7 years. My predecessor, David Chauncey, had a decade. Gerald Harris had a decade. Clark had a couple of decades. Clark Hudson. We're going to talk to all of these men, and we're grateful. But it has been, but you know, I'm convinced that even to this day, our missions efforts, our desire to get the gospel out, it all you know, our DNA was set back in the missionary heart of the Roswell Street pioneers. It was set with people out here who loved Jesus and wanted to reach community with the gospel. And then I think a spirit of excellence that carries on to this day, I think it was started back then. And you laid the foundation for us. You were the John the Baptist, both of you, who came and set the tone. And we still, I benefit from it to this very day. And I want you to know I recognize that, and I appreciate that. Let me get back to just some historical moments. Do you remember either the first sermon you preached here, what it was, or do you remember what you think over the years was the most lasting sermon or defining sermon you preached here, or a series, whatever? Was there anything that stands out as a pulpiteer?
I have to say that I'm humbly thankful for the church that put up with some of my poor preaching.
I'm grateful for the church that puts up with mine today. Are you kidding me?
There is a development in our lives and ministries. I'm thankful humbly for the wonderful foundation that I received. I didn't come to Christ till I was a teenager, and I have to honor the precious memory of Reverend Carrie R. Moser, my pastor who baptized me, Moody graduate. When I was called to preach, I told him I want to go to Bible school 2 years and I'd be ready for the work. He said, "No, you won't be ready for the work. You'll never be ready for it, son." And he said, "What you need to do is to go on and go to college, get a broad liberal arts education, then go on for your training at the seminary."
Right.
He said, "I never did that, but I want to tell you that God," he had this old mountain saying, he said, "God always uses the sharpest axe. And son, your axe is dull."
But he had the good sense to send you and just say, go to school.
That's right.
Get training, get your liberal arts degree, then go get your theology on a master's level.
Someone called me this week about someone that I baptized back in the 60s. And I said, I have to confess, I did not keep at that point in my life my sermons or what I was doing.
Like a log or a diary.
Like a log. I learned that later.
Yeah.
And I have been a lifelong learner, as my
experience
and education has witnessed. But I know one thing. The Lord called me. He gave His Spirit, His Holy Spirit to me. I believe His divine word. It is the divine revelation from God, the only revelation from God. And I try to preach it as honestly and humbly as I know how. I know that God gave me this wonderful woman as my wife. John, we just celebrated 62 years together. And we're now propping each other up, if that makes sense. So I'm going to answer your question. I don't remember, although it's interesting, Mrs. Judah Kilpatrick, who was one of the charter members here, lives in Athens with her son. And when Mary talks to her occasionally, she asks, now, where's Ken preaching? And she would tell her. And the last time we saw her, we visited her, she said, have you preached that sermon again? I said, which one, Judah? He said, that one about God disturbs me.
So they remembered it.
She remembered that
There you
sermon
go.
after 60 years, almost 60 years.
Isn't that something?
And I'm just, the wonderful thing about preaching is that we are presenting Christ to the world. And as we do, that divine living word and written word is empowered by the Holy Spirit of God. And when you preach, when you teach, you never know how the Spirit of God is going to take that message, those words, and apply them to someone's heart.
Ken, this isn't about me. I just want to affirm with a brief story. I pastored People's Church in Toronto from 93 to 2000. And every Sunday, like I do here, share the gospel. And I went back for the church's 90th anniversary in 2018 and preached in 3 services there. And after every service, Ken and Mary, after every service, I'd have 4, 5, 6 people every service come up to me and say, Pastor Hull, you don't know me. We've never met. But in 1995, I was sitting in the balcony right up there, and I prayed to receive Jesus with you.
Amen.
Or you baptized me, and I had no recollection, no knowledge, but over and over again. And then last week, Ken, you got to love this. I got a letter from a lady, and I don't even remember this conversation, but she said, you don't know me, but we sat next to each other on a flight from Toronto to Vancouver in 1990, and you shared Christ with me. And 5 years later, I came to know Christ. Now I'm active, and I just felt led of the Lord to say thank you for sharing. And I want to share that letter at an upcoming elders meeting just as a reminder of what we do. We're in a very difficult secular age, very difficult, but the gospel still transforms people. And I just only want to affirm what that statement, you never know.
That's right.
Only God knows. But, Paul told the Corinthians, says, more was just required in a steward to be faithful.
That's right.
And that's what y'all have been through the years. Can you process what you went through when you get to 1966, 1967? Do you sense the Lord loosening your roots here? Did a letter come from the mission board? There's an opening, we're ready. Did it happen suddenly, or did you kind of sense the Lord preparing you to leave here to go there? Take us back to that. Do you have a recollection of that?
Yeah. You go ahead first.
Actually, when we got the word from the International Mission Board, I couldn't find him. He was up in the plane with Evio de Oliveira.
Oh, yeah.
With our son, and I didn't know our son was up in that little plane. But
That's a separate conversation, I'm sure. Yeah.
But the Lord knew that it was our time. It was
Right.
time.
Actually, we had settled the issue that we would not go to the mission field.
You'd settled that
We
issue.
had settled it. I thought it was
And that's while you were here.
while we were here.
You felt God was
I-
changing the direction of where you thought you'd be.
We felt
Interesting.
very honestly and sincerely that this was the place for us. There was, I think, affirmation from the Lord, affirmation from the congregation. The ministry was going wonderfully well.
Sure.
Actually, I had a telephone call from Lawrence Thibodeau. Lawrence Thibodeau was a old South Louisiana Cajun preacher, He was associational missionary down in Houma, Louisiana. He called me from the Home Mission Board, which was down in Atlanta at that time, on that day. And he said, T. Frey, he always called me T. Frey, little brother. He said, little brother, T. Frey, I've come to take you back to South Louisiana. First Baptist Church Houma has asked me for a recommendation. And you're the most uncaged Cajun I know. So we want you to consider that. And I said to him, Lawrence, I cannot believe this conversation. Thank you for your love, for your affirmation.
Sure.
This morning, about 10 o'clock, Jim Sturts, who was former pastor of the First Baptist Church in DeLand, Florida, and at the Foreign Mission Board, called and said, Ken, we've been looking through our files, and we just felt impressed to call you and ask, would you and Mary be interested in talking about mission service? And it was as though, I don't know, I can't even explain the feeling. It was like I started to say, no, we're happy here. But in my heart, the Lord just said, okay, now, you hadn't been ready, but
now.
you may be ready for what you're going to face now, which was a whole different world out in Southeast Asia. And it was as though the Lord took away this burden and laid another burden. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And no one can quite understand that who hasn't been faced with those particular decisions.
And the peace of God ruled in your life that you go to the field. And proof over time that you did hear what you were supposed to do, and then God brought the next one and the next one and the next one. What's it like for you now, looking back, what was a church that had a cow pasture view? You now live in this community. The Atlanta Braves have a huge stadium 10 minutes from here if you hit the traffic lights right. There are 800,000 people alone living in Cobb County. There are a Sunday morning drive in any direction within 20 minutes of here, well over 1 million people living in this area. We have, you've heard me say this, and you understand it because you were in and out of Atlanta through the years. We had churches that we saw struggle that were inside the perimeter as neighborhoods changed, demographics changed. And now we are a church that is, although physically outside the perimeter, we have all the feeling of that urban inside the perimeter thing. I mean, 285 and 75 are stones throws away. What's it like, Ken, seeing, I look at this and I think, because I grew up in Marietta, and I remember my first time here was 1972. I came here with my mother, and Manley Beasley had a revival, and it was down, this one even up. There was the downstairs fellowship hall that was the main worship area. And I remember Eastside then, and very different now than it was then. We have a changing state. We have a changing county, changing community. I look at it all with great excitement because the gospel is the gospel. But you've lived the span of seeing it as it is today, living in just a stone's throw away yourselves, to seeing how it was. What are our takeaways? What do we need to be thinking about here? Any wisdom, any thoughts on this? I think I know where you'll go with this, but you need to speak to this as to what's important as we get ready for 2021, 2022, and with everything we're facing with pandemic, and it's just a different world. What's your thoughts as we navigate through these days with Jesus as Lord?
One of the most surprising things about growing old or getting old, which I am, is how rapidly things are changing, have changed. I don't look back on the past as the good old days. A lot of them were not so good, very frankly. I have been teaching lately on God's revelation of himself in the scriptures, and impressed again with the experience of Moses when God said to Moses, Moses, I am, that's who I am. I am present. I am eternal. I was, and I will always be. And that brings great comfort to my heart. We're not living in the past. We have to live with the realities of today.
Right.
And John, I still have a pastor's heart. I've prayed a long time. God, at 68, if you take away the burden, then I will be able just to sit back and rock in my rocking chair. The burden is still there.
Sure.
And I say to my mind's still good, my heart's still good, although this body seems to be giving me some difficulty these days.
It's not bad for the model, Ken. Not bad for the model.
I tell you, it's been a long, long journey, but it's been a wonderful journey. And I'm positive about the future. I would just say several things. First of all, as I speak to people, wherever I am, I find people terribly hungry and lonely, and many of them unaware of God and his grace and his mercy. And I think that we need to continue to challenge God's people that the Lord is still on the throne. Amen. He reigns.
Amen.
Hallelujah. He reigns. And all the glory is for him. As long as he leaves us here, we must be proactive, active, aggressive. I think even aggressive. Other religions are very aggressive as they look in at America. They're very aggressive, wanting to bring their faiths here because of our lack of faith. But America has a great spiritual heritage. We have a strong biblical base of God's revelation. We know what the gospel is. I think we need to get off of our seats and get back to work. Mm-hmm. It just may be that some of the old techniques of Dr. Evans in his simple book on personal soul winning, he said, preacher, just go from door to door. Knock on the door. Give them a tract. Give them something. Introduce yourself. We just need to confront people. We need to be there. And I believe that God's Holy Spirit leads us. He knows where we need to be, and he will direct us. So I think we need to think outside of the box. We cannot lose the basic biblical truths and the evangelistic spirit. I think we have to do that. Your dad was an evangelist. Mm-hmm. And you remember sincerely the burden of his heart, sure. Not only for the pulpit, but for personal soul winning. And I would, as a pastor, it meant much to me to have men go with me out to visit, to reach out to the community. I think too, this is a day of advertisements, and we need to, I believe, advertise the church. And I think we need to multiply our availability. Multiply our availability. Someone spoke not long ago about church in California. It had such a thick door on the main street that you could close the door and not hear any traffic outside. And the visiting evangelist said, No, you need to open that door. You need to open the doors and open the windows and let the gospel go out from this place. Now, we're going to do it personally. We're going to do it through every IT means, every avenue of Facebook or programs. Let's use every one we can. But let's not forget the basic evangelism of trying to reach people and somehow make ourselves available. And I just believe that God will bring them.
Ken and Mary, your heart for Jesus is as hot as it was and as passionate as it was 65 years ago. And we're very, very grateful for you. Thanks for spending some time with us. Mary, any final thoughts before we conclude this?
We just thank God for Eastside and what it's meant to us personally. Through the years, they've supported us, prayed for us, given us the house that we live in now, and a good fellowship to come to.
And approaching now 4 generations of Eastsiders.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us.
Changes.
And all the changes. Mm-hmm. And now COVID.
Yep.
And we don't know what all that means. But the beauty of what you've done here is that you have, by the grace of God and the Holy Spirit's power, you've given birth to a lot of spiritual children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren now who know you, love you, respect you. And there's still some of you that has rubbed off on me, and it still continues here. We preach the word, we proclaim Christ, and we're just grateful for you. We cannot put into accurate words how much we appreciate your pioneering spirit. But we wanted to have this time together, and we may do another time together. We've got a whole year to celebrate. And I want to say to those of you that are watching, we hope to be able to provide a linkage between the Ellisons all the way to today of the Eastside story. And there'll be one theme that you will see over and over again as our church had high times and low times and conflicts and changes and transitions and a whole community and culture and country that's changed. The one thing that you will see is the faithfulness of God. God has been faithful to this church family and has allowed the blessings of God to come out of this place exponentially to touch people all over the world, and that's still the case today. Remember the old Youth for Christ saying, Ken and Mary, it's anchored to the rock and geared to the times. You know, I think that's been us, and I'm preaching the same gospel that Ken preached here 60 years ago, and that's been said of every man who's been in this position through the years, and we have an elder board and a body of believers who love Jesus Christ and are committed to getting his word out from Genesis to Revelation. But it all started here, humanly speaking, with Ken and Mary, and we love you. Thanks for taking time to join us today. You're going to see a lot more of these stories. We're looking forward to bringing in former staff members. We'll obviously have former pastors, members through the years. We're going to try to those that can't get to us, even with COVID, we're going to try to get to them so that they can talk about their memories. And we're going to have a catalog, a great catalog of memories to celebrate God's faithfulness. Thanks for being with us. God bless you.